Hi, and welcome to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast presented by Wolf Precision Incorporated, where we learn about and share long range shooting and custom rifle building. I am your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. Hi, and welcome to episode 179 of Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome back to the show. In this episode, we're going to continue on our series on the making of the Ace Part 2, and we're going to dive into the first generation, second generation, and of course, the closest I came to being arrested in Washington, D.C., or an interview with our liaisons at the Patents Office. So, that'll be an interesting podcast. We hope you enjoy it. So, without further ado, here we go. So before we get started, I want to say thank you to TriggerTech. TriggerTech is the maker of fine rifle triggers. They're made from our great Canadian friends in the north. They make it for lots of different makes and models of different rifles. We like them here because they're safe, they're easy to install, and easy to adjust. So if you want to upgrade your rifle or your shooting game, you can do it by installing a quality trigger in your rifle. And you can do that by stopping over to triggertech.com. That's triggertech.com today. We'd also like to thank Krieger Barrels. Krieger is the maker of fine cut rifle barrels made from the great state of Wisconsin. They are a family-owned and operated business. They have been making world-class barrels for decades now, and they have a new program called Krieger Direct where you can log in and have your barrel in as little as 2 to 3 business days. So if you want the best and you need it now, stop over to KriegerBarrels.com. That's KriegerBarrels.com today. So to pick up where we left off with the history of the ACE system and the processes we went through as far as a business, as far as product development, and the processes of even getting a patent involved. For me as a small business owner, it was an amazing journey. I learned so much along the way. I also learned a lot of hard lessons as far as your approach and maybe even your departure from different projects or different products or different processes. There's some pain and suffering involved in all of this as well. So maybe it's something that you as a shooter, you're interested in hearing in the development of a new process for rifles, or if you're a business owner, just the typical stories of small businesses growing and working their way through all the landmines in life and business and everything else that you're working on or working towards, as your end goal is to try to grow and establish a working business model that's self-sustaining. So, our goal here when I started building rifles was not to go into business to build rifles. When I started, I just wanted to build rifles for myself. And it grew into a product that other customers could see the value and the quality of the work that I was doing. And then it grew into something, well, how can I repeat this process without Jamie's hands doing it every single time and maybe do it better? Not the same, not as good, but consistently better. And that really starts off the story of the hunt for the ACE, or the solution to the problem that we were having. And then down the road to, okay, now we have something, now what do we do? So the first prototype for the ACE was actually fired on Christmas Eve. I went to the range, super excited, of course, in 308. And I posted up some pictures, I believe, on one of our blogs. You can see the picture of one of the first groups that we actually fired through the ACE system using a 308. And man, was it exciting. It was one thing to have a theory and to draw everything out on paper and to say that, hey, we think this would work and we think this is better. But it's another thing to take it out to the range with your stomach upside down. All the theories now, you just put them to bed, because here's where it matters. Is the rifle going to perform? And it performed beautifully. It just hammered groups in there over and over and over again. And different ammunition. We went down and did a little stint with a gentleman that wrote some articles in West Virginia. We took a 223 and 308. He shot 8 different brands of ammunition through both rifles, and both almost the same point of impact, incredible accuracy. And he was shooting it off of a sandbag with no rear bag. And, for him, he was just amazed that, not only did it shoot great, but it shot all of the ammunition so well. And we've learned that across the board. So the things that we've learned as we were growing, and I'm going to dive back into the processes here in a minute, was the rifles really aren't that picky. One of the reasons why I think some rifles are so finicky in trying to find the perfect load is just because you're trying to deal with some imperfect work that's inside. But once you get that straight, once you get that perfectly straight throat and chamber lined up, and then all of a sudden it's a little bit more merciful. So what we found here is like, even with one of the government testings, so we have had rifles and have built rifles for multiple government agencies now, and we're really hoping to win one of the contracts. When they were testing one of our rifles, not only did we cut their groups in half from what their current standard is, but they had ammunition that from the factory at best is only guaranteed to shoot 1.1 minute of angle. That is the best it will shoot. Our rifles shot that ammunition in 0.4 MOA. And they were astonished with that. Like, there's no rifle that they have that shoots that ammunition that well. And we think it's, 6-7 years of hard work and research and development that led up to this. It wasn't easy, but one of the things that you find as you keep working on projects is you keep finding that, hey, not only is it solving a problem that we had, but there's other things it's bringing to light that it's helping to solve as well. So the data is still coming in, and we're still learning stuff every day. We're still growing. We have now our 3rd generation ACE system, and we're working on a couple other patents as well. And that could be interesting. So let's dive back to the second part of the ACE story, or the history of the ACE. After we ended up making the first prototypes and testing them and going over all of the potential what ifs and how do you manufacture this, that's where the business part of this whole process comes into play. When the original ACE system was developed, it was more expensive to make the ACE than to do the work to the barrel. So, for example, when we make an ACE chamber, we have to hold everything perfectly true to the center line of the cartridge, right? We have to do a female thread and 2 perfectly straight and true surfaces to the cartridge on the front. Then we have to chamber. We have to thread and face the back shoulder of the ACE system. And all of these surfaces, all of them, threads on both ends, faces on both ends, have to be held perfectly true to the center of the bore line, right? The first ACEs that we made cost, not counting all the research and development, not counting all the setup and tooling and everything else, the very first ACEs, our cost was about $585 per. So when we would do a test run of 10, it wouldn't be nearly $6,000 just to test that cartridge or to run it across multiple boards. And I think this is where a lot of your small businesses start to wobble a little bit. So when we first worked on this, before we said too much, we did a lot of research and we found out that nobody had tried this before. And to me personally, that was the biggest shock. Like, I'm thinking in my mind, there had to have been somebody out there that has done this before. It just makes sense. Why wouldn't you? And when we did all of our research, we couldn't find anything, not a single thing on it. And so then, some friends of ours said, look, before you say anything to anybody, before you start really working on this, you should consult a patent attorney and have him do a research on it and make sure, and if it isn't patented or if it's not been done before, make sure you work on that process, because it is open game if you don't, right? And so we hired one of the best patent attorneys in the country. His name is Michael, and I'd like to invite Michael onto the podcast, talk a little bit about the story of DC. Maybe we'll get him on here to talk a little bit about the importance of when you come up with a new idea. A lot of people really get wishy-washy on patent attorneys, and I want to share with you that they are worth their weight in gold. They charge you their weight in gold, but filing your own patent and going through the processes, especially if it's something that's really important, or if you don't have staff that are experts in it, is a really dumb idea. So when we hired Michael on, he did his research, he come back and he was like, there's nothing. This has never been done before. So let's go ahead and start the processes of getting patent pending on it, and then we'll keep working it from there. So while we're testing, we're also paying and having all the research done for patents, as well as getting the patent pending applications and getting our patent applied. And you've got artwork, you've got engineers, there's so many people involved in this. And from a small business perspective, I've said in a podcast before, and I'm not poor-mouthing at all. I don't shame anybody that was born with an advantage or that had family that worked really hard that left them a small nest egg to start their business. That is awesome, right? I hope to do that for my family. So I hope my children and grandchildren get an opportunity to start life with a chance to go out and start a small business if they have to, and not have to go to a bank or something like that. You want to leave something behind for the next generation. So for me, though, that wasn't the case. And the first 4 or 5 years, my wife will tell you that we took no vacations. I worked probably 70 hours a week on average. And every dollar that I could make went back into the business. Every dollar. I mean, I paid myself $18,000 to $20,000 a year salary just so my wife wouldn't hang me out to dry or worse, right? So I had to pay myself something. I couldn't survive on nothing. But I literally paid myself nothing, and all of it went back into the business. And I think that's where a lot of small businesses get into trouble. So here's the choices you have. When you're working and growing and you're a small business, and most small businesses are just surviving. They're looking at not the next 10 years, they're looking at the next month. They have bills to pay, and they have to make money every month. And so a lot of their attention is divided into trying to make that dollar to pay the bills, as well as trying to work on new product at the same time. The problem with most small businesses is now you're in trouble, because really in your mind, you only have two choices. But there's a third there, and I want to share with you the third one, and we'll go back into the A story. Most people feel that right out of the gate, the first thing they should do is go and get investors. They want people to invest in their idea, to give them a bunch of money to start this business and to launch it, and to give them the assets that they need to get this off the ground. That is a double-edged sword. For me personally, when I hear people say, and you read a lot of business books, they say, that, hey, go out, get a great idea, go get investors. Go out, get a good idea, go get investors. There's a price to pay for that. And those investors, they're smart. They're at a level that most of us common working folk aren't at. They know how to manipulate situations and deals. They know how to get their foot in the door so they can start manipulating. Lots of people have lost their businesses through investors. So you have to be really careful. Not only that, but there's the devil in the details, that eventually there's bills to be paid. Not only do they want their money back, and they do, they want it with interest. And that in itself can crush you and give them an opportunity to take your entire business as far as you're a debt to them. And so I'm a big fan of Dave Ramsey and his approach to life and business, and I really enjoy all of his books. And, as a student, young entrepreneur, I guess you would say, I am very open-minded as far as listening and reading. I probably have listened to and read more business books than anything else. And some of it I take with a grain of salt. Some of it I like to hear what other people are saying and how they approach things. But the first option that most people in small businesses have when they have a good idea is they want to go get investors. The second thing is they go to the bank, which in my mind is just as bad, if not in some cases worse. I remember when I started my small business, I wanted to take out a small business loan, and to get some equipment to get myself started out. And I had perfect credit, never a problem with any of that. And I remember leaving the banks just feeling heavily abused, like they would promise one thing, yeah, that's no problem. Just let us know what you need, and here, let's do this. But by the time the deal started coming to close, and all of a sudden, we have to add this and we have to do that. And, we need you to put your house on the line. It's a $20,000 note. We need you to put your house on the line and sign your house over or your deed over as part of. And for me, I left the bank meetings feeling like I was crawling out on my hands and knees, just as if I crawled in on my hands and knees, begging and pleading somebody to help me. And I swore to myself right there, I would never go on my hands and knees again and ask somebody like that and be treated that way, or leave feeling that way. You leave feeling like you're being taken advantage of, that you feel belittled, you feel, it's, for me, it was an awful experience. And I said to my wife, I'll be damned if I crawl on my hands and knees into a bank and kiss their ass. There's no way I'm doing it. So I went out and I bootstrapped it. I worked my tail off to put money in the bank. And every time I put money in the bank, I left it there until I could afford to buy another piece of equipment or other parts and tools that I needed. And between my wife's grace to use a credit card, which was dumb, I wouldn't tell you to do that now, but a small amount on a credit card just so I could finish getting the lathe that I needed, and paid that off as quick as we could. But from there on out, we bootstrapped it, honestly. It was amazing. And when we got to this part with the patent, this was tough because a real patent attorney is $250 to $500 an hour. And we're talking 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, $100,000 sometimes if these patents go into hearings or if you go into a battle for your life, you've got to have the money to do that. And as a small business that's just, growing, how do you come up with that kind of money? And so for me, the third option was just to work my butt off and just come up with the cash, work, and get that money in the bank and invest it in yourself. And that's exactly what we did. We didn't seek out investors. We didn't go to the bank. We just worked. And half my time was spent working extra hours, teaching extra classes, doing everything I could do to get as much money in the account to keep paying the work towards the patents and the product and research and development. And those were tough years. My wife, God love her, we've been together 25 years next year. And I will say that she has been such a champ through this because there was 5 years we didn't take a vacation. And she works full time. She's a professional. And for her, she was supporting me and taking care of the family and taking care of the family responsibilities and the bills and the insurances and everything that she was working for was taking care of the home front, while everything that I was working for was going into the business minus a small salary. So that was the third option that I chose. And I always say that I think most small businesses fail, not because of any other reason other than they just get tired. And I can remember waking up just delirious. I remember going to bed, just my head spinning, and getting up the next morning, flopping your feet over the side of the bed, getting your stuff together and getting out the door and getting after it again. And oh my God, I hope I never have to do that again. I mean, I would if I had to. Don't get me wrong. This last year proved that we still can do it. But the process of the ACE went to, okay, one of the bigger issues and the obstacles that we ran into was not only do we have to do it perfect, but we have to have a perfect machine that's capable of doing it perfect. And so when you think about the complexity of taking a round part and drilling a hole in it, which is very similar to a chamber, forming the chamber, machining all of these faces perfectly true to the concentricity or straight through the chamber, where the chamber would be in the middle of the ACE system, then we have to pass the part off, introducing no cant, no movement, no offset. It has to be in perfect line with that axis of the center of that cartridge. And then we have to machine the whole other side. So we actually do more machining on an ACE than what most gunsmiths actually do in a barrel. And so right out of the gate, a lot of the guys involved were like, wouldn't it be just easier to do the barrel? And I'm like, it would be, but I think I see something here that's worthwhile for sure. And it still is. A gunsmith can actually chamber and crown a barrel and thread the muzzle. He's doing the same work that we're doing, except for we have to do it to the chamber, and we still have to do it to the barrel to accept the ACE. But for me, the trade-off was scalability, right? Is not only are we achieving the ultimate level of consistent accuracy, but we can repeat the process. We're not dependent on human hands, and we're not depending on the mood of the gunsmith that day or the quality of the work that they want to put out that day or the skills that they have, or we can repeat this process over and over again, not one time, not 1,000 times, but 1,000,000 times, and have the same outcome. That's, to me, was the end goal. Getting the scale and getting the price down, that's a whole nother story. But the first was to say, can we prove the concept that this is sustainable and that we can repeat it? It's one thing to build a couple Lucky rifles. It's another thing to repeat it. And so that required a machine at Bat Machine. It cost, oh my gosh, I think with tooling almost $1 million. And this is back, years ago. So if you can imagine what that value would be now, because we knew that if we were going to make this part, that if we couldn't have any other flaws in the system or it would play itself out. So we decided to go with the best machine in the world, the best machinist in the world. Bat Machine is just legendary in their capabilities, and they did not disappoint. I mean, truly experts, not just close friends, but experts in their field and world-class machinists. So now here we go. We've got our first generation ACE out. And we're shooting it and we're testing it. And all of us are sitting back with amazement like, oh my God, these things are hammers, right? And then it dawned on us, okay, no, now we got to make them in different calibers. How do we solve the problem of somebody putting or accidentally putting a 308 on a 223 barrel? Because we're making the chamber, which is caliber specific, separate of the barrel, which is caliber specific, giving anyone the opportunity to mess this up. And, you can go the other way. You put a 223 on a 308 barrel, and it might not be catastrophic, right? It's probably not going to shoot real well, but it's not going to be catastrophic. But if you put let's just say, for example, a 308 chamber on a 270, you're in trouble, right? You're in really, really big trouble when you pull it. So what we came up with on that end was we decided that all the threads to accept the barrels would be caliber family specific. So, for example, a 30 caliber, where the ace or the female portion of the ace accepts the male portion of the barrel, all 30 cals are a specific thread, all 6.5s are a specific thread, all 7mm, all 224s, all 6mm. So there's no way you can cross-thread or put the wrong caliber on the wrong barrel. So we solved that problem. And then it dawned on us that, wait a minute, now that we can put the chamber on, how do we, and why couldn't we reuse it? Because as we were testing them, we were pulling them back apart, right? And what we noticed is we could put them right back together again. And in pressure testing and in accuracy testing, one of the things that we noticed is that the chambers were not being damaged in any way. In other words, they don't wear out like your barrel does. And we're watching this for a while, and we're like, this is sort of interesting. I wonder if we could reuse the chamber over and over again, if this is something that we could possibly recycle. And we did it a couple of times. We actually changed calibers. So, for example, one of the test rifles was a 6.5 Creed, the other one was a 6.5 PRC. And what we did is we took the same barrel and we were moving the chamber back and forth to see if there was anything to it. And they shot great. I mean, it was amazing to watch. And we even sent out one of our old shot out barrels. Bruce can tell you the story. When he was testing one of the first Bumblebees, he was pressure testing it with the 6.5 PRC. And he had asked, hey, you got any old barrels? Because I'm going to pressure test this and probably destroy some parts and pieces. And I was like, yeah, we got that old 6.5 that we were beating the daylights out of it, testing one of the 6.5s, multiple calibers in 6.5 through a barrel. And it had like 3,000 rounds to it or something like that. So I sent it out to Bruce. He put a 6.5 PRC ace on it. And he was still shooting incredible groups out of it. He was like, I just can't believe it. He said, here's this thing. And he was shooting 10-shot groups, sending me pictures of, close to half minute. And he said, I'm not even trying, right? And a true story you can call and ask Bruce about. It was sort of funny. And then all of a sudden the challenge became now we couldn't show 5-shot or 3-shot groups. All of our groups had to be 10-shot groups from now on. But, so, of course, he was testing with a battery system and mechanical rests and everything else so he could, let the rifle away from him because he was pressure testing. But it just was one of those amazing things that we sent him out a used barrel, a used chamber. He put it together, and there it is shooting just like that. And so the second step that we got into was making it reusable and having something that was a replaceable seal, and that led us down to what you currently see. And I would say the second generation ace is that we had a replaceable sealing unit inside that if you take the chamber off, you can replace this part and it will reseal, and then you can put it onto the next barrel, which we thought was cool. And then the third generation, just a bump ahead, we actually put some dimples in the ace system. And they make the ace look a little bit different from everything else in line. So there's these little circles that run around it. But they're actually for our chamber wrench to take the aces on and off the barrels because, we need that extra support because we're torquing it on and torquing it off. We want to be able to grip it real well. And so our third generation was developing tools to be able to take it on and off efficiently and effectively without damaging anything or breaking anything. And so that became the third generation. But one of the most amazing parts is that while we were developing the system, of course, we were going through our patenting process. Now, if anyone was to ask me, what did you like about the patenting process or running through the patent process? And I would like it to, every other day, someone taking their foot the whole way to the rear and then coming the whole way forward as hard as they can and kicking you between your legs. It was just like a whirlwind of emotions. It was just like getting kicked in the groin over and over again. Like, not only that, but financially, he's just hammering the daylights out of us fighting for this patent. And this is where I always say that the value of a patent attorney is worth their weight in gold. So the patent examiner said, hey, let's go ahead, because we've been doing everything remotely, let's go ahead and have a meeting. Let's bring in all the parts and pieces. Our patent attorney and our patent examiner actually worked on some of the original 700 patents. So he was very, very well versed in firearms and production. And their job is to make sure when they issue a patent that they issue a good patent. In other words, they just don't want to rubber stamp something and somebody challenge it and then they were wrong. If they're going to put their name on it, they want to make sure that it's a good patent, right? And so we decided to go ahead and fly our patent attorney into D.C. I drove down here from Pennsylvania and have a meeting with the patent examiner to go over the processes and some of the finer points that everybody was talking about and trying to relate through emails and writings. Let's get some parts on the table. So I went down and had breakfast with Michael, was his name, and we went over to the patent office. And this is the closest I've ever came to being tackled or handcuffed or thrown to the floor in my life. We were going there with firearms. Now, they weren't completed firearms. These were rifles, and they were receivers. They were, chambers and barrels and stuff. And I didn't realize, and we had talked to the patent examiner, and he said, bring all of your stuff. But he had to clear it that we were bringing these into the building. Apparently, you're not allowed firearms on any type of government grounds like that. And when they opened that bag up, all hell broke loose. I mean, they got super excited. The security guards grabbed us. They were off to the side. They were interrogating the shit out of us. They were really amped up. And, as a police officer for quite a long time, you can see when somebody's excited, right? Like, that you're like, oh, shit. So my patent attorney's like, shh, don't say nothing here. Let me take this, because, it was really getting exciting there for a minute. And he was like, no, we have a hearing examiner. You have to call him. We're supposed to bring these parts in. And they're like, you can't have firearms in this building. There's no firearms allowed in this facility. And I was like, holy shit, So here comes our hearing examiner trotting down the hall, and I could see him looking, and he got really excited, and his steps really got quick. Now, he wasn't full on a run, but if you did a picture of somebody power walking, this was him coming down the hallway to save our asses. It was hilarious. So here he comes, and whether he didn't tell them or the right person didn't get the memo or that we were coming in for, and of course our hearing was scheduled, or our interview with the hearing examiner was scheduled for the meeting. But he come in and he's interviewing like crazy, and he's like, no. He said, I sent so-and-so, they're approved to bring this in, and blah, blah, blah. And he went through, and they weren't buying it there for a minute or two. They were pretty amped up, and then after a while, things sort of calmed down. And then, of course, we explained to him that although they are components of a firearm, there were no working components. So there's no trigger, there's no ammunition. We had some dummies to show, how the designs worked. But man alive, I will tell you that we went from a nice, lazy breakfast, chit-chatting away and having a really great morning, and went down to have our interview and sat in a room and talk with some really smart people. And it went from 0 to 100 mile an hour to almost, feeling like, hey, we're going to get tossed on the floor and thrown in handcuffs here. And it was pretty exciting. So I don't want to overplay it or underplay it. Maybe from other people's perspective, it wasn't that exciting, and it maybe not that big of a deal, but it was a pretty big deal in my shoes. I was like, oh my God, we're going to get arrested. So anyway, we had our hearing and we had our interview with the patent examiner. And from there, it went great. Got a chance to sit down with a gentleman who was really well versed in firearms, explaining all the things. And, things that are so unique about our system that's never been done before, that the interview went so great that, half an hour, 40 minutes after our scheduled time, we're still sitting there talking. Like, he was just totally fascinated about how the system worked and just getting the concept, because, like I said, he had been involved in other firearms patents before, and this is the first time he's ever seen anything like this. And he just thought, wow, this is really unique. This is something that's very interesting. And so from there, myself, Michael, everybody involved, we ended up winning our first patent, and then on to a second patent, which we'll save that for another story. Would I do it again? Yes, I would. If my advice to anyone out there that's looking to do a patent would be to make sure that you have something that's worthwhile. And if it's really, really worthwhile, if your gut is telling you, you've got to go for it, right? And here's where you got to be careful following your gut instincts, because it can get you in trouble as well. But if you truly believe in what you're doing, and you truly believe that what you're doing is going to make a difference, go for it. But I would also really recommend the potential to look at and get a real patent attorney. Like you'll see online, people say just file your own patent. There is so much into making a patent, not just making a patent that you can win, but making a patent that you can defend, that you can protect yourself from, because people will challenge you, and they can. And so you want to make your patent as bulletproof as possible, and no pun intended, which is what led us to our second patent, trying to really tighten down the grips that, anyone decides to either take on or try to challenge our patent or steal it, that makes it really, really difficult for them, that we have legs to stand on, because you have to be able to defend it. But would I say do it again? Yeah, I would do it again for sure. I mean, we're doing a third patent now, which I really believe is another really, really big deal in my heart. And so we'll see how it plays out, but I'm doing it again, although this time I'm a lot more versed on the processes. But I would hesitate if it wasn't something that was going to pay for itself, or if it wasn't something totally unique that was going to change your industry. And not to discourage anybody from going out and getting a patent, but just telling you that, oh my gosh, it was so much hard work and it was so expensive. I'm going to say over 6 figures till it was all said and done, and that was just the first one. For maybe a company that's worth, $100 million, $100,000 patents, not that big of a deal, right? But to a small business owner that's really bootstrapping all of that money through hard work, earning those dollars one at a time, that's a really big bite. And man, I remember working a lot of extra hours. I was teaching shooting schools all over the place. I mean, I was traveling to North or South Dakota, Georgia. I mean, anywhere that anyone would have me that I could teach a class to put money back in our account to keep paying for the processes. It was amazing. So I would do it again. I would just caution people to make sure that A, their gut's telling them that they have something special and that this is going to work. And then just be ready, get ready for the hard work involved in it, because it is, I certainly wouldn't put it, on a credit card. I would not do that in a heartbeat, because if you lose or if something happens, you still owe all of that money. So I would try to do it out of pocket. And I would probably try to avoid doing it with investors that would put their name on it or be parts of the patent, because if you do that, then they have rights to use that patent. Consult your own patent attorneys and your own attorneys, but I'm just saying be careful with all of that as well. So before we continue on, I do want to say a quick thanks to our last sponsor of the podcast. I want to thank MDT. They've been a great sponsor of the show since its beginning. They make world-class chassis. We're really excited the fact that they make so many different makes and models, from really good entry-level chassis like the Oryx to the top-of-the-line J. Allen, which is just one of my favorites. So you can look, we've done some video reviews on our YouTube channel if you'd like to stop over. But I do say if you want to shoot 700 beyond and you want to consistently do well, you have to have a rifle stock that fits you and fits you perfectly. In order to do that, sometimes you have to change the stock. So if you want to upgrade your rifle and do it with a chassis, we really recommend you stop over to mdttac.com. That's mdttac.com today. So we'll save the rest for part 3 when we start talking about putting and going into production, like, all the research and development for the first multiple years, all the caliber selections, all of really just ironing out the process. And I think that's where I'll finish this podcast up here is one of the things that we're really careful with. And I think that if I was to give some advice on this one is getting your processes in place first, figuring out how to make it consistently and grow organically. One of the things we were really careful with when we started developing the ACE system is mum was the word. We had clients and we had friends and we had family, and we were growing as a business, but we were doing it quietly. We were putting on our podcast maybe years ago. We were doing a small video on YouTube, or you could read about it on our website, but we didn't go to the top of Mount Everest with a megahorn. We didn't go out and buy 50, 60 different writers to write a bunch of articles on how we've invented the greatest thing since sliced bread. We didn't. We left this take on organic growth, and it was a hard way to go. But the reason we did that is we wanted the first couple of years to grow slow, build our customer base up using the system, and let the customer speak on behalf of the rifles. It afforded us 2 things. Number one, it afforded us the opportunity to grow at that pace, to keep ironing out processes. And it kept us, number 2, from growing too fast and then all of a sudden being behind. I think one of the bigger issues with most small businesses is they finally make it and they fail, simply because they're not ready to make it yet. And we knew that we had to have our processes in place. We knew we had to have a system in place. And getting all of these, from barrel manufacturers to the processes of how we're going to cycle in and out how we're going to make the ACE system itself, how we're going to work on the barrels, there's a lot to this. And if all of a sudden you're overwhelmed with orders and you don't have your processes in place first, you're going to make mistakes. And when you make mistakes, you wind up losing customers. When you lose customers, you wind up losing your business. And so a lot of people say, well, I can't believe you've been around that long. It's the first time I've heard of it. And that's really the reason why, is we were really careful not to go with a megaphone and just scream to the world that, hey, here we are, we've invented this, and this is, we think, the best thing since sliced bread, and, try to oversell it when we weren't ready to serve that many customers yet. We weren't ready to put that much into production yet. We were getting our feet underneath us as far as ironing out the process to be able to do that, but we weren't ready. So that would be my last piece of, maybe just a little advice, or just something I would throw out there. Is one of the reasons why we've taken this road, is that specific reason itself. Now, if you want to see something interesting, we'll be posting up a short couple-minute YouTube clip of one of the barrels being spun up here in a new Okumas. We'll talk about processes in the next podcast and how we started getting ready to scale with the ACE system. So that'll be in section 3. But thank you, everybody, for taking the time to listen. We really appreciate it. If you're interested in our online long-range shooting school, we have a special till the end of the year. So you can attend our entire online long-range shooting school from the comfort and convenience of your own home. It is a monthly fee of $49.95 a month. It takes about 2 to 3 months to attend the class. And, of course, you can log back in and re-attend anytime. Also, if you like the podcast and you'd like to support the show, you can stop over to Patreon. It's $3 a month to join the Wolf Pack. We certainly appreciate all those that have done that as well. Thank you so much. So we'll continue on with the story of the ACE on part 3, and we're going to get into system processes. Might be boring for some, might be interesting for others, but just how we scaled, or how we started approaching the process of getting into full-on production, not with your standard machines that are most machine shops have, not with your standard machines that most your gunsmithing shops have, not with your standard machines that would be in your quote-unquote high-end custom rifle builders. We're talking about setting up and using aerospace-grade equipment, stuff that launches satellites and makes medical-grade equipment to the firearms industry. And this is where scaling matters. This is where the rubber meets the road, from going from an idea to a scalable, repeatable, super high-quality product. It's about the processes and choosing the right equipment. We'll save that for the next podcast. So thank you, everybody, for taking the time to join us here on the show. I really appreciate it. My name is Jamie Dotson. I am the host, and you are listening to Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building Podcast.